Hi, I'm Ilana, and this is a presentation that really started with my senior project at Gann Academy. I decided to spend the last few months of high school learning more about the connections between Judaism and Islam. Then I continued to develop this project during my gap year before college. I'm going to start by showing you a series of slides with a word on each slide. And I want you to just take a minute and think, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you see the word? And what emotions does it elicit? In his book, Acts of Faith, founder and president of the Interfaith Youth Corps, Eboo Patel writes, "To see the other side, to defend another people, not despite your tradition, but because of it, is the heart of pluralism." And when it comes to the relationship between Jews and Muslims, I believe that Eboo Patel's words ask us to reflect on two overarching questions. So the first question is, in what ways does Judaism call on us to stand up for other people, in this case specifically people of another faith, Islam? So for me, the first thing that comes to mind is the commandment in the Torah to love the stranger and treat the stranger or the other with justice. And according to Rabbi Eliezer in the Talmud, in Baba Metzia 59b, the commandment to love the stranger and treat the stranger with justice appears 36, others say 46 times in the Torah. That's more than any other commandment. We are commanded, Ahavtem et hager ki garim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. Love the stranger, for you were strangers in the lands of Egypt. And as Jews, we have a long history of enduring suffering and oppression from ancient times to modern times. And it's important for us to remember this in order to empathize with others and to stand up against injustice. And this really ties into the other way in which Judaism calls on us to stand up for other people, and that's the concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world. The concept of tikkun olam, the way we think about it today, as repairing the world, originates with a story, The Breaking of the Vessels, created by Rabbi Isaac Luria, also known as the Ari, who was writing in the 16th century. So according to the story, when God creates the world, God pours divine light into 10 vessels, but the light is so strong that the vessels break, sending sparks of light scattering across the earth. And so it is our job to go and gather these sparks of light and repair the world. The second question is, how specifically does Judaism give us insight into Islam so that we can repair relationships between Jews and Muslims and combat prejudice within our communities, both Jewish and American? To begin to address the second question, we're going to start off with a text study. And we're going to look at a text from one of the great Jewish systems of ethics, Duties of the Heart, known in Hebrew as Chovot HaLevavot. It was written in the early 11th century by the Jewish philosopher Rabbi Bachya ibn Pekuda, who was living in Muslim Spain, and his work was greatly influenced by Sufi teachings. Sufism is a mystical branch of Islam that focuses on the inner life. And I also want to note that Bachya Pekuda influenced other great Jewish thinkers, such as Maimonides. The story is also cited in the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, the first Hasidic work published. And I'm mentioning this just because I want to emphasize that the story we're about to look at, this passage, is found in two great Jewish texts. So let's begin. Can I have a volunteer to read the Hebrew?
ואמרו על חסיד שפגע נשים שבים ממלחמת אויבים ושללו שלל אחר מלחמה חזקה. אמר להם, שבתם מן המלחמה הקטנה, שוללים שלל, התעדתו למלחמה הגדולה. אמרו לו, ומהי המלחמה הגדולה? אמר להם, מלחמת היצר וחייליו.
And does anyone want to read in the English?
It said of a pious man who met some men returning from a war against enemies, and they brought spoils after a raging battle. He said to them, "You returned from the small war with spoils. Now prepare for the big war." They asked, "Which big war?" He answered, "The war of the Yetzer and his troops."
Now, we just read the original Hebrew translation of Duties of the Heart, but in fact, Bar Pekuda didn't write the original text in Hebrew at all. He wrote it in Judeo-Arabic, which is the Arabic language but written in Hebrew letters, and it was originally published under the title Al-Hidayah ila Fara'id al-Qulub, and then only later translated into Chavot HaLevavot as we know it today by the great translator Judah ibn Tibbon. And what is fascinating, and Professor Diana Lobel points this out in her book, A Sufi Jewish Dialogue, Philosophy and Mysticism in Bachya ibn Pekuda's Duties of the Heart, is Bachya Pekuda's word choice for small war and big war, because again, he wasn't writing in Hebrew, he was writing in Arabic. So let's take a look at the Arabic words that he uses. In the original, the sage says, "You have returned from Jihad al-Ashkar, the lesser jihad. Now prepare for Jihad al-Akbar, the greater jihad." So we have a Jewish text that discusses jihad. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's discussing jihad in terms of this idea of this greater jihad is the inner struggle and working on yourself, right, against the Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination. And it's that battle against yourself, and that's the greater jihad. Now let's take a look at the passage in the original Judeo-Arabic and an English translation of the original, which you'll see actually differs from the English translation of the Hebrew that we looked at previously. Here the righteous man says, "You are returning, praised be God," from the smaller battle. And the name Bar Pekuda uses for God is Allah. And I also just want to point out something that I learned, and it's just really fascinating, is that Maimonides also, he was writing in Judeo-Arabic, and he referred to God as Allah, as you can see here in this excerpt from the original of his great work, Guide for the Perplexed. The sage, the chassid that Bar Pekuda is quoting is actually Muhammad. And in fact, the source of this text is a well-known hadith. A hadith is a witness report of Muhammad's words and deeds as observed by his companions. And these reports were passed down for generations by word of mouth until they finally began to be written down and compiled in the 9th century. And I just want to note that traditionally Muslims will add peace and blessings be upon him after mentioning the name of Muhammad. In fact, they will add peace be upon him after mentioning the name of any prophet. And there are many prophets in Islam, including, just to name a few, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Moses, Jesus are all considered prophets in Islam. I mean, so just think about that, right? We have this Jewish text that refers to Muhammad as a chassid, a sage. And it's likely that Jews reading the text and learning the text at the time would have known who the chassid was, who Bachya Bakuda was referring to. They would have known it was Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها.
One of the things that I love about interfaith work is that not only do you learn about other faiths, other religions, you learn more about your own. And so one thing I didn't really realize, I thought of Tikkun Olam mostly just as the outward social justice work. But what I learned about through my research is that there's also this internal aspect of Tikkun Olam, this working on yourself in order to make yourself the proper vessel to carry the divine sparks of light that you're seeking. And this is an inner struggle that we have in Judaism. So just a really quick background. According to Islamic tradition, the Quran is the divine words of God transmitted to Muhammad, the prophet of God, through the angel Gabriel. And unlike the Torah, the Quran wasn't revealed all at once. In fact, it was revealed over a 23-year period. Muhammad received his first revelation in Mecca in 610 CE when he was 40 years old, and he stayed in Mecca for the next 13 years. But during this time, as the Muslim community grew, they were persecuted by other Meccan tribes. And then there was a plot to assassinate Muhammad in 622 CE, and he fled to Yathrib, which was then named Medinatu Nabi, city of the Prophet, known as Medina. For the first 13 years, Muslims were prohibited from fighting even in self-defense, and they were being persecuted by other Meccan tribes at the time, but they weren't allowed to fight back, even in self-defense. And I'm mentioning all of this because it's important to note scholars differentiate between the Meccan period, the first 13 years, and then the Medinan period, the next 10 years, up until Muhammad's death in 632 CE. So when jihad is used in the early revelations from the Meccan period, it's referring to some struggle other than the physical battle. Here are two verses from the Meccan period that mention jihad. And again, since fighting even in self-defense was prohibited at this time, the jihad mentioned here refers to a struggle that does not involve physical combat. Now let's look at the first verses to permit fighting in self-defense. And this is from the Medinan period now. The Quran states that people who are persecuted because of their religion, merely for saying, "Our God is God," are allowed to defend themselves. And here the Quran speaks of houses of worship where the name of God is mentioned, not only mosques, but monasteries, churches, and synagogues as well. was just so interesting. This is one of those moments where I'm just so excited about the connections between Judaism and Islam, and I learned something new that I didn't know about Judaism. One of the central rituals in the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, is the circling of the Kaaba, or the cube, which serves as the main sanctuary in Islam. And as Ruvain Firestone points out in his book, An Introduction to Islam for Jews, Hajj is equivalent to the Hebrew word Chag. So Chag in modern Hebrew can refer to holidays, but specifically in biblical Hebrew refers to the pilgrimage holidays, and that's Shavuot, Sukkot, and Passover. One meaning of the Hebrew root Chet Vav Gimel, Chug, is to make a circle or to move in a circle. So something I thought that was just so interesting is Ruvain Firestone writes that in the ancient Israelite tradition, there may have been a custom of having a circling ritual during the pilgrimage holidays, which is similar to the Hajj, the circling of the Kaaba. to go back to the word slides from the beginning of the presentation. And again, I want you, when you see the word, just think, what's the first thing that comes to mind? What emotions does the word elicit? And has anything changed since the beginning of the presentation? Thank you. So now I'm going to end with a quote from Eboo Patel that really resonates with the situation today. So here we have the Shahada and the Shema, which are both testaments of faith and testaments to the oneness of God. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something. Please share what you learned with others. It's so important that we start working to clear misconceptions around Islam right now. It's really important. So again, thank you, and Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, peace be upon you.